Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward. Chapter 60. Kayana breathed in low tones. We must stay quiet. Can you move your legs? Millie grimaced in pain, working herself up into a sitting position. Her arm was a bloodied mess. It must be broken from where the rubble had landed on it. Sucking in air sharply, she fought to keep tears from blotting out her vision. Kayana, please tell me we're safe now. It hurts. Forcing her legs to move, Millie rose unsteadily into a crouch, her arm hanging uselessly down beside her. Kayana quickly tore a part of her shift to form a makeshift bandage and wrapped it tightly and efficiently in place around Millie's arm to stop the bleeding. Millie's eyes bulged in pain, but to her credit, she stayed silent. There are at least 3 other riders that I saw, Kayana whispered softly. She pointed at the other side of the wreckage with her finger, hoping to minimize any further speech. Stay low and follow. Kayana risked a look back, but did not see anyone. The other riders may have scouted towards the other end of the caravan, or perhaps they had traveled back to find the body of their crew leader, Ranel. Keeping herself low to the ground, Kayana crab-walked to the edge of the wreckage. They were located in a narrow canyon, but there were outcroppings of rock that could be used as cover. Unfortunately, there was nowhere to go but forwards or backwards. The cliffs of the canyon were too steep. They would be spotted immediately if they risked a climb. Kayana's mind considered their options. They could stay here among the wreckage and hide under the warped wooden beams, hoping to hide in plain sight, but any inspection of the wreckage would leave them at the mercy of their pursuers. She could also risk taking them further into the canyon, but there was a chance they would run headlong into another group of riders. They would be at a severe disadvantage against 2 mounted warriors. The third option was to loop around behind them, hoping to avoid an encounter. However, with no food or water, they would need to meet up with the merchant trains soon, and that would put them miles of hard walking through the desert out of their way. There was a very real chance they would get lost or risk missing the rendezvous if she chose that option. Steeling herself, Kayana led them forwards. She fingered the dagger at her side, tucking it into her belt. Reaching down, Kayana pulled the heavy sword Sandar had carried earlier into her grip. It was poorly balanced and much heavier than she would prefer, but it was functional. It would suffice, she hoped. She could hear Millie gasping in pain as they shuffled along, perspiration coating thick on her brow. The young woman was in danger of passing out from shock. It was a miracle she hadn't so far. Kayana wondered how long it would be before she had to carry her. She mouthed, "Wait," to Millie, and rose to stand before silently moving forward, scouting. Peeling herself forward across the rocky outcroppings, Kayana moved delicately, careful not to disturb any rubble lest she bring attention to herself. The red canyon narrowed further ahead before separating into a series of passages, each barely the width of a wagon train. She now realized Jess's cleverness in choosing this route. Had they made it just a little farther, they could have left their pursuers wondering which passage they had taken. Kayana wondered if they all opened up and merged together farther down the canyon, or if some of the passages would lead them astray. Now, however, they were in grave danger. Millie needed to get medical attention. Kayana worried she might slip into a deadly fever from the broken arm. Bone break fever, as it was known in some parts, could make one delirious without the proper treatment. In the most serious of cases, it could lead to the death chills that the local populace feared more than anything. If Millie lost consciousness, Kayana would need to carry her, with no supplies of food or water. She dared not retrace her steps to check for supplies from the broken caravan. She could be met with a growing group of armed riders. Their best chance was to make their way through one of the passages and come out the other side of the canyon, gambling everything on making their way to the meeting spot of the merchant caravans. They would need the aid of a doctor and the protection of a full group of wagons could provide. Their predicament reminded Kayana of a hanging. The noose was drawn tight. The only luck was that the hangman couldn't seem to find the precarious stool the 2 of them stood on for balance. If the wind shifted a hair, they could slip and hang themselves, saving their pursuers the trouble. Kayana knelt and began to cover herself in dusky reddish-gray sand. She smeared dirt on her cheeks and arms. If she stood still, She would blend into the red rock and dirt, if no one was looking closely. It was a small thing, but she would use every opportunity given to her. Kayana darted forward into one of the passages, not wanting to leave Millie for too much time alone. She checked for any marks of recent passage, but only possessed rudimentary tracking skills. She didn't see any of the easy signs, no footprints in the sand or scuffed piles of dirt. Retreating quickly, she searched the mouths of each of the other passages, hoping to find something, some sign of mounted riders. With no clues presenting themselves, she hoped they had somehow moved ahead of the other riders. Perhaps the riders had circled back after they had passed from her sight earlier. Kayana retraced her steps back to where Millie lay. Before she rounded the bend, she could hear Millie's labored breathing, almost as if... Immediately flattening herself against the wall of rock, Kayana tensed, stilling her movements. She gripped the dagger in her hand, not daring to breathe. She could hear two sets of breathing. One was labored and weak. It could only be Millie. The other was heavier and came in quick succession. Whoever it was must be angry or excited.